Welcome to San Mateo County Today. Conversations with government leaders throughout San Mateo County. Here's your host, Marshall Wilson.
Burlingame and Hillsborough share a lot in common. Not quite sister cities, but awfully close. I'm joined today by two top officials, by the Mayor of Burlingame and a council member in Hillsborough. We're going to talk about what they have in common, some shared resources and lessons for us all, and also what got them involved in local politics. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to San Mateo County Today. I'm your host, Marshall Wilson. Worldwide, we hear about Brexit. We hear about border walls, really bringing people not together but apart. I'm here with officials of two cities today who are actually bucking that trend and working very closely together. So I introduce Councilmember Jay Benton of Hillsborough and the Mayor of Burlingame, Ricardo Ortiz. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
So,
it's a pleasure.
What is it you're doing to work together? You guys share a common border. How are you working together these days?
I'll let you get started.
That's very cooperative of you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Starts right at the top. I think the best example is one that's existed for 14 years, and that's Central County Fire Department. Mm-hmm. Both Burlingame and Hillsborough had independent fire departments, and in 2004, we merged those two departments to form what is today Central County Fire. When we merged those two departments, we had over 100 personnel providing medical and suppression. Today we have on the order of 60 doing the same work. A very skilled team. The two towns have worked well together. And then about a year and a half ago, perhaps two, I've forgotten the timing, we contracted with Millbrae. So now we provide fire service to Millbrae. But in addition, Central County provides training to San Bruno, San Mateo, Foster City, 4 or 5 cities. So it's worked very well together. We've never had a dispute on how we break up the cost or any of that. The towns have really worked well, and it's really a classic example of a merger benefiting both communities, and more importantly, the residents.
We've had other fire agencies in this county that have been together and have split apart. How is it that you don't argue about who pays for what? How does that all work out?
I would say it was all well spelled out at the get-go, and we have a good relationship, and the board meets regularly to iron out any differences, and it's been working out well. I would think that's the key. So,
it was interesting when we were putting that contract together. There was weeks of debate about how we're going to break up the cost and who pays for what, and finally, in one of the meetings after all this, it all seemed to come around 60-40. 60% Burlingame, 40%. And somebody finally said, why don't we just do 60-40? And it's that way today.
What are some of the other common issues that you find yourselves working together on?
Well, I think Councilman Benton was talking about an issue on trees on El Camino. There was a proposal for a left turn, dedicated left turn on El Camino at Floribunda. And I think we jointly pushed back against Caltrans, asking him to make a simpler solution, which is simply not a left turn allowed on southbound El Camino to Floribunda. Saved the trees. We all worked together. I think everybody was very pleased with that. We love the trees in Burlingame, so it's always about them.
We share 1 block of El Camino. That's all of our town that touches that street. But our residents are just as passionate about those trees. So when Caltrans came in and said, we want to solve what is admittedly a dangerous intersection, but we want to do so by removing half a dozen trees, I've forgotten, widening the road and really changing the character of that part of the highway.
These are large eucalyptus trees.
Right.
These are not just recently planted trees. These are 100-year-old trees.
These are the heritage eucalyptus trees. Anyway, we both said there's got to be a better way. At least try a simpler solution, and if it doesn't solve the problem, you can always come back and take out the trees. And that was literally putting in a no left turn from going southbound into Burlingame, and because there's 2 traffic signals within about a half a block, resynchronize those so the traffic stops. Problem was people making left turn into Hillsborough and being hit on the right side. That was the core issue. Well, they've had some success. I think the intersection's safer today, and we didn't spend nearly as much money as Caltrans wanted to spend.
And we kept our trees.
And the trees. The culture of the community was preserved.
Well, and Burlingame, of course, has a very large commercial area, Broadway, Burlingame Avenue, and then also along Rollins Road and so forth, some pretty substantial businesses. Hillsborough, of course, doesn't have businesses. How do you go about financing your town without that tax base?
Hillsborough, 2/3 of our revenue comes from property tax on single-family residents, so we are absolutely dependent on that. The mayor will tell you that they get a substantial part of their revenue out of hotel occupancy tax and sales tax. We don't have either of those.
Right.
We are dependent on property tax. But the turnover of homes has allowed that revenue, once we got out of the depths of the 2008 recession, to grow at about 5–6% a year, and that's housing turnover, and that's people like me that have been in my house for 40 years, selling to younger families, paying under Prop 13. And we've managed our expense side well. So today the town has a balanced budget and adequate reserves for contingency. So we are in pretty good shape financially. And one last thought, when the bottom dropped out in 2008, we were far less affected because we didn't have that commercial sector that dealt with that. The residential side dipped. I don't think our assessed valuation in the city ever went down. We had to deal with years when it never went up, but never actually went down. So we had a little easier time of it.
Yeah, for us, we're very dependent on our hotels. We get the lion's share of our revenue from the hotels. So back during the crisis, that amount shrunk. So in 2001, I believe it was $13 million. It is now $26 million. So we have to keep reminding ourselves that what goes up might come down, and as opposed to the property taxes, which is just a steady climb. So we have both, and we need to. When we do our reserves, we understand that will eventually come down again, and it's a little different for us. So, and the sales taxes too. So we get a lot of the sales taxes from our car dealerships that we have on California Drive.
Right, I imagine also because of Burlingame, you have a lot more on the expense side as well, because you need to keep all that infrastructure maintained. And you recently completed a project on Burlingame Avenue that really is looking very sharp.
Right.
Or do you have any other projects, or what's happening next in Burlingame?
We have about $100 million in projects that we need to catch up with, including many of our facilities, roads, parking lots, biking infrastructure, and then outside of that, we also have the grade separation of Broadway, which has been, it's a very dangerous intersection. Now that we're finishing the exchange over 101, we need to finish the overpass, the grade separation of Broadway. We're just starting, just getting money to do the engineering drawings. But that's $250 million that obviously we're not going to pay for, but we will have to contribute a portion to. So our biggest challenge is finding funds to do all these infrastructure projects that we have, and we're far behind.
What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing in Hillsborough these days?
I think the infrastructure, common to most communities. We're a small town. We have fewer than 12,000 residents, but we cover 6.5 square miles, and lots of canyons separate the town, so it's not even a linear. So we have over 100 roads 100 miles of roads, sewer pipes, water pipes, all of which is aging. So we have had substantial challenges in upgrading our sewer system to comply with California and federal clean water requirements. And also in the water side, we operate our own water department as well as sewage. We collect our sewage. We actually work with Burlingame and San Mateo. They're the two treatment facilities. So we buy that service from Burlingame. Half of it goes to Burlingame, about half into San Mateo. So we are partners with them on that. So those are challenges for a small town. We just completed a major sewer upgrade on El Cerrito, which is along San Mateo Creek. Had to be upgraded because of the creek. And that was $10 or $11 million project the town paid 65% of, shared with the county and city of San Mateo. That's a lot of money for a small community, but it had to be done.
All right, well, thank you for this segment of San Mateo County today, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to San Mateo County today. I'm your host, Marshall Wilson. I'm here with Hillsborough Councilmember Jay Benton and Ricardo Ortiz, the mayor of Burlingame. Gentlemen, thanks again for being here today. I want to talk now about water. That's something that is our shared resource everywhere, and I know that's a big issue for both of you. One, and then having water for both of you for water for your cities, but also sea level rise is affecting us all as well, especially in Burlingame. Not a pressing immediate issue for Hillsborough, though. So tell us what you're doing on the waterfront in your communities.
Well, water for us is domestic water. We don't have the sea level rise as a community. We do have it as a county. That's been a huge issue. When we went through the 2015 drought mandate, Hillsborough had one of the largest requirements to reduce water use. We're a large, leafy community with larger homes and lawns and all that needs water. So that's been a big challenge.
And that's the beauty of Hillsborough. That's one of the reasons people move there.
It's our culture. And so it was balancing the need to cut water substantially with preserving the culture of the community. And I think our citizens did a marvelous job. We actually reduced water use in 2015, 2 years ago, by over 40%. Obviously, trees got stressed and lawns went brown, and we were delighted we didn't have to do that again in 16. And of course, today, we're looking at no drought restrictions. But we also know that long term, the state is driven by making conservation a part of our everyday way of life, and that's probably going to be forever. And that will tend to impact Hillsborough and how we use our water.
In our town, the water, our biggest challenge is our infrastructure once again, and we have started a while back replacing a lot of our water lines that are 40, 50, 60 years old. The issue then is this has to be added to the bill, the water bills, and so we've had some pushback. We try to go gradually up and try to take our time in doing our improvements, but we are ahead, I would say, ahead of other communities. And I think there's some of the other communities are starting to face that now, and you're seeing water bills come up, or neighbors. We were way ahead of the 8 ball there, so we're really happy about that.
I imagine it has to be tough to tell people that their water bill has to go up to improve something they can't see, which is something underground. Is that a hurdle for you?
Well, that and part of the reason it's gone up too is the San Francisco, the water, the Hetch Hetchy water has gone up too. So they don't only not see the infrastructure they're paying for because it is underground, but they do see it when it breaks. And so that's a good reminder when we have a water main break and we say that's what we're working on. But we also have to raise the price to match what San Francisco's charging. So it's twofold, and yes, it has been frustrating.
And I would add one other tricky and very difficult problem to explain. The less water you use, even voluntarily using less water, is going to cost you more money. And that's counterintuitive. Yeah. But the fact is, we have most towns have a large fixed cost component that's got to be supported. Got to maintain fire suppression throughout the town, tanks, pumps, etc. And when you're selling 40% less water, it requires a very large increase in the per unit cost.
Right.
So they got a bill that's just as expensive, even though they saved all this water. And that tends to fill chambers with how come. But it's part of the requirement to maintain the infrastructure.
And Burlingame, of course, does have a very large waterfront area. And we've been reading more and more about sea level rise. And the county just recently issued another report about the threat of sea level rise. How do you go about planning for something that's going to be happening, perhaps decades away? What are you doing to prep today?
Well, there's a number of things we're doing as far as new projects in town when they're in that area that we have to be mindful of sea level rise. But outside of that, we need a regional solution. I mean, Burlingame alone is not going to fix. So we are working with the airport and with the rest of San Mateo County to come up with regional solutions early on. But it is an important subject for us. Like I said, about $26 million comes from our hotels, and they're all right there, right on the bay. So we're very aware of it, and moving forward, where everything that happens in that area addresses sea level rise.
So as mayor, what are your priorities for the upcoming year?
Well, I'm 4 months into my year as mayor, but our priorities at this point are infrastructure and finding ways to finance our infrastructure. We are way behind with City Hall, with our community center, streets. Again, there's a lot of things we have to catch up with, and finding a way to fund them is our biggest challenge. Again, at the end of the day, all we're looking for is quality of life for our residents. That includes good finances, good services, and the infrastructure, and we have to catch up.
And you have served as mayor. What are your priorities for Hillsborough in the coming year?
It's similar. Infrastructure must be maintained. You got to have the money to rehabilitate and improve. We're always looking for not shortcuts, but improvements and efficiencies to drive the fixed costs down. We have other issues in Hillsborough. We have maintain our own police department. So we're always looking for ways to make the community safer. Hillsborough is proud to say it's the safest city in California. And that's because we hardly ever have violent crime. But we do have petty crimes and burglaries and robberies that are very disconcerting to homeowners, mostly daytime, 90% is daytime. So we're constantly figuring out how to keep the bad guys out of the community. And we just introduced automatic license plate readers, so we have a couple of those in town. Citizens read that that's sort of an end-all to the problem. Well, it's not. It's a tool. And they want us to put them at every entrance. Well, we have 30 entrances to the town. Not going to happen. We're not like Piedmont, which can do that. But it's a tool. So, and we're pleased to say that after a spike last year, crime, robberies and burglaries, those sorts of things are down this year. So far, so good.
All right. So in our next segment, I want to pivot away from infrastructure and those issues and talk more about why you became involved in local politics in the first place. It often seems like a thankless job. And we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome back to San Mateo County Today. I'm your host, Marshall Wilson. I'm here with, I guess they're not quite twin cities or sister cities, but they share a lot in common. The mayor of Burlingame, Ricardo Ortiz, and Councilmember Jay Benton of Hillsborough. We talked a little bit earlier about water bills, which is, I shouldn't say a dry subject, but it might be a little bit of a dry subject at times. But that really gets people coming down and flooding your, I gotta stop with my puns, flooding your meetings. I want to talk, why do people get involved? Why individually do you get involved in local government and kind of take that heat from people? But also, I'm sure there's a lot of public service you want to give back. What prompted you to get involved in your local government?
Well, it began when I was still working as in the private sector. I had a career. We have committees of volunteer citizens. I happen to be on our financial advisory committee, which advises the council and the staff on matters financial. I've been on that for 7 or 8 years. I was approaching a retirement in my private sector job. I actually had been involved when Governor Schwarzenegger first came in. I was asked by one of his department heads to get involved with the one of the departments of government. And so I had a little experience doing that. And so when I retired, one of our council members approached me and said, you know, I'm not going to run for re-election. Would you be willing to run? So I did and was elected in 2008. So I'm beginning my 3rd term. I think as all people, and probably both of our communities, you want to give back. We've lived in Hillsborough for 40 years, we have 5 kids, one of whom lives in Hillsborough, one lives in Burlingame. We want to all educated through the Hillsborough school system. So you want to give back to the community that has provided well for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, we were talking earlier about our professor at CSM who was in city council for many, many years. So I ran into her at the church one time and we started talking. She shared a lot of information about the city and how it's run. And then at one point we had a notice from the Planning Commission about a building being brought right behind our house, a cute little house that we had in Oak Road. And so I went there to talk about my opposition to the project, and they looked at me and said, well, you're in the R3 lot, and from then on they started paying attention. And then I've been involved with many, many different community organizations. And so you just kind of get that thing. And I looked at the way things were working at the time, and I thought just, to me, it felt like it needed to be a little faster. Of course, now, 3 years later, I've learned why things move a little slower. And that's the one thing I have learned since I've been there is patience. But so what I did eventually, I decided to run against 2 incumbents, which is brilliant. That didn't go too well. I came in 3rd of 3. That was on 2011. 2013, then
I bet you learned a lot.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because we did, and the person who helped me with my campaign, we had all the material, everything, was able to bring it right back up for when we ran again. And I told everybody I'm not running against an incumbent. And so when one of them decided not to run again, I said, that's the opportunity. And so I thought, easy. We had 9 candidates. It was a crazy campaign. I won by 8 votes. So that's when I learned that every vote truly, truly does count. And it took about a month to get the final results. It was a roller coaster. And it's been wonderful ever since. So, but yeah, took a little doing.
Well, you two became involved. How do you go about getting people involved in your local community? We hear a lot these days about people really are not engaged in local politics. And I sometimes think I can know more what's going on in Syria than I do, maybe in a city or 2 down the peninsula. How do you go about fostering that sense of civic pride and getting people out and participating in their local government?
Well, I got to tell you, we just recently had interviews for our planning commission, and you'd be surprised the quality and the quantity of people that we had applying. It was really rewarding. So in Burlingame, we actually have people who are paying attention. People are very concerned with the quality of life and the maintaining the charm of Burlingame. So we do have a lot of people who stepped up. It was a tough decision. And before, there's other times where we just had a few candidates. It was a real tough decision. So we do have people engaged, but every time we have an opening, I think council and even former council people would get on the phone and call people and say, okay, we need help. We need you to come and step up and do that. The commissions are the best place for them to get involved. And we get some of the more dedicated people. But we do have a lot of nonprofits that work in town that people get involved with. And again, that kind of builds the fabric of the communities, all these organizations and the relationships you build in them. So we encourage that. And again, we have 3 of our council members that came out of the foundation. One of Donna Colson I first met. We were both serving on the BCE board. And so that's been, the schools are huge in Burlingame, and there's a lot of participation, and that's how we get a lot of civic engagement.
I think that's true. People do want to give back to their community, and they do feel passionate about it. From time to time, I've been asked to speak on behalf of the town, public service groups, and I remind them that relatively little of your tax dollar, property tax dollar, goes to the town you live in. In Hillsborough, it's about 18 cents out of the dollar. But out of that 18 cents, you see police, you see fire, you're on our roads, parks, sidewalks, streets. That's what you're getting for your 18 cents. Now, you don't see much of what you're getting for the other 84 cents or 82 cents. We know it's there, it's in schools, it goes to the county. So people know about the 18 cents and they want to have a say in what those roads look like. And our council does not have any direct relationship with the school system, that's a separate board, but we obviously work very closely with one another. Now what's interesting, closer you are to where the money is spent, the more interest you have in how it is spent.
Yeah. Now, you obviously have merged a lot of your services. Are we going to be looking at any other mergers or do you have any lessons learned for other communities that are looking at merging services, or not necessarily merging, but sharing services?
Go ahead.
I was happy. We don't have anything impending. I think it's a good idea, and I think we have a good model to follow for future sharing, but we don't have anything currently in the works.
We spoke about fire early on, but Hillsborough contracts with Burlingame, as we do with San Mateo, for library services. So we support them on that. I mentioned the sewage treatment we use both cities. Our public works departments are beginning to share more of the that large equipment that's only used occasionally. Both towns don't need to have 2 of all that.
Right.
So we're sharing more of that. And that's just staff being logical and efficient and working together. Because of fire, we share emergency services. So, for example, our EOC room is actually in Burlingame at their public works yard. I think it evolves. I don't see anything being forced on either town. Both towns are operating beautifully as they are. But as staff or the elected see opportunities for efficiency, these 2 towns are willing to listen and say, well, maybe that is smart. And I remember a couple of years ago, there was some casual discussion about merging police. But when we got into it, we realized our policing is quite different. You know, we're a residential community worrying about Saturday night parties. They are, you know, their commercial requires different police requirements. And we thought, no, best not to do that.
And a few years back, we also explored the possibility with San Mateo. And again, found that there were some differences that didn't make sense, and so we pushed back. But personally, I'm always open to looking at possibilities. And, you know, there will be more opportunities in the future.
All right. Well, Mayor Ortiz, Councilmember Benton, thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us on San Mateo County Today.